Hello, party people. Can I hear some noise? The great thing is, how many times have I introduced the podcast saying, hey, hey, party people? But this episode is really the episode for the party people. So if there was ever a time for my semi-awkward dad joke introductions to pay off, this is the day, people, because we're talking about the sauce, as Amy has referred to it before.
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like from an alcohol standpoint, there's definitely been a transitional period in my life. I remember, prior to gut issues and kind of leading up to the exacerbation of gut issues, I was still drinking a decent amount. And then just being a young adult, I think rather typical drinking for a young adult, but it just, again, then I swung completely where I never, was super freaked out to ever drink. And then it's sort of finding a new middle ground where, at this point, I can't drink right now, but, at this point, I'll drink occasionally and I don't ever really miss it. But it was weird. It was almost for me, the alcohol side of the spectrum, the transition felt a little bit like the diet restriction too, where if I totally restricted it, it felt like, it would be really nice.
I'm missing out.
Right, I'm missing out. There's also just weird dynamics too if you're friends with a lot of people that drink.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed there too is sometimes they feel more uncomfortable with you not drinking than you do. You might, again, feel a little oh, I wish that I think there were feelings for me. Oh, I wish I could have a little drink. And I probably could have. It was just I was too restrictive in my mindset. But then again, I think there's a little bit of, if you're around a lot of other drinkers, they're oh, why don't you loosen up and have a drink, or maybe they feel a little bit of judgment or something, you're not drinking, you think you're better than us or something, which isn't true, again, and I don't think everyone thinks that way, but I think there's kind of some weird personality types that you can run into, even that I'm friends with.
They don't know how to behave. They're okay,
right.
If everybody around me is drunk, then we can all act drunk and not worry about being judged at
right.
all. But if there's a sober person in the room, do we have to alter our behavior?
Right. And I think, again, for me, being young, it was hard to kind of figure that out. And sometimes I feel like friends just wouldn't invite me places because it's oh, she probably wouldn't want to come, even though I probably would. I just wouldn't have drank and have been totally fine. I just think it created because so much of our socialization is around drinking, it created a weirder dynamic around social situations when I was very strict. Which, again, I don't think there's any problem with you not drinking. It's just, I think it can be a little bit weirder to maneuver through. At least that's what I've found with my friend groups. If you're choosing not to drink and they are drinking.
I think it's so much else, right? There's happy mediums and there's the context of the person. So,
right.
Like you're saying, if the primary way that you were socializing with people was with alcohol, even if it's what is the champagne and orange juice drink? Is that a screwdriver? Mimosa, thank you. Even if it's a mimosa with your brunch gang once a week or something like that, if that's a way that you're socializing and then you take that away, we talk about the vagus nerve so much and how the vagus nerve needs you, if you want the vagus nerve to work, then you need to feel some degree of safety and connectedness and fulfillment and all of those happy oxytocin releasing feelings.
Right.
And, socialization and hanging out with other people and having friendships and bonding with people and laughing with other people, that's a big part of that. So if you start socially isolating yourself because you feel like you can't drink or you shouldn't drink, then that could actually be disruptive for your motility. It might actually be more therapeutic to allow yourself to go out and have the mimosa with your brunch gang once a week and just kind of come to terms with that. That being said, I want to say this early on, because like, do what you love, or like telling people, oh, if it brings you joy, then it's therapeutic and it's going to heal you.
Right.
It does have a limit, so we still have to be smart about it. Like if you were a crack addict and crack brought you tremendous amounts of joy, I would not recommend that you go get crack and do crack. I don't even know, like, do you smoke crack? Do you eat it? I don't even. But like, I wouldn't tell you to go get crack thinking, oh, it's going to be therapeutic for your vagus nerve, because like the risk benefit analysis does not fall in favor of something like that. So similarly, if it brings you a tremendous amount of joy to get completely annihilated like 1 or 2 days a week every single week, I don't know, man. Maybe we need to talk about that and like bring it down a couple pegs. Maybe you can get tipsy instead of utterly annihilated and like blackout drunk, and maybe you just do it once a week instead of twice a week. So there is some context here, because doing too much of the alcohol can definitely be detrimental for your gut. We're just saying you probably don't need to go down to absolute zero for this to work.
For sure. I think we're giving a balanced perspective. I 100% agree. Like, in terms of how we view moderation, it just skews so much across the board. Like, when I say, oh, I'm not a big drinker, and it's like, that's probably, maybe I drink once or twice a month. It's usually not very much. Like, again, when I'm not pregnant, not currently drinking, but like, again, it's usually not very much. And again, like, that seems to suit me. Whereas, like, again, I've had clients where they're like, oh yeah, I drink like in moderation. And then I'm like reviewing their chronometer data, and they're like, they had put 2 cups of wine. And so I was clarifying, like, and this was each night. So they would kind of, this one particular client I'm thinking of, she just loved fine wines. Like, that was like kind of one of her loves. And she would start drinking like while she was cooking. And then again, like, I was asking, like, okay, did you mean 2 glasses of wine? Because a glass, I guess, is technically around 4 ounces, 5 ounces ish. Maybe 3, somewhere in there. Like 3 to 5 ounces.
Like an actual serving. Yeah.
Right. She was like, no, it was like 2 cups, you know, because the cup's 8 ounces. So it's essentially like 4 glasses of wine. Yeah. So I'm like, if you're doing that every night, we definitely need to cut back. But like, to her, that was moderation. Yeah. So I think, again, like, sometimes it does take questioning, like, your bias. And I know we've talked about this in previous episodes of what does moderation really look like from an alcohol standpoint. But, you know, you don't need to go, you don't typically need to go really abstinent from it. Unless, again, I think there's very few cases where you might want to cut it out for a period of time. Especially if there's like any gastritis or ulcers or anything kind of along those lines, you might benefit from cutting out for a period of time, like, more strictly. Yeah. But I would say typically it's not something you have to totally cut out.
For a gut healing perspective, I'll add, like, if you're an addict, if you're an alcoholic, or if you have like addiction issues, then you absolutely need to go cold turkey. But we're talking about this from like the gut kind of perspective mostly.
Right. And I like that you give the context of like going out for mimosas once a week. I know I can't remember if it was one of his podcasts or if it was in one of his books. But Chris Cresser, I know, shared a story, and it's always stuck with me. And he had like a young client who just was not getting better. Like, they were trying all these things that should be helping. And the client just kept getting more and more frustrated, and again was on more of a strict diet. And finally, I guess Chris sat down with the client and was like, what do you feel like, what do you want to do? Like, is there anything you're not doing that you really want to do? Like, trying to just kind of explore different areas. He's like, I just really miss going out for pizza and beer with my friends each week. We used to do it every week, but I just like haven't been going. And so Chris was like, I want you to start going for beer and pizza each week. At least, again, like once a week, like you used to do. And he said from that point on, his client started getting better. So it's like, again, this fine balance of if drinking is keeping you from socializing and enjoying your life, or cutting that out is kind of keeping you from doing the things that you enjoy, then it can be really problematic. But I like that story because it like so emphasized the need for socialization and bonding during healing. And again, some things that might not necessarily be like, I don't think anyone's going to be like alcohol's optimal or helpful for gut healing per se, like in terms of what it does in the body, but like the overall net could still be really positive if you're balancing it properly. So again, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think also there's this element, and I think you've spoken to this a little bit. Luckily, I didn't get too into this mode with my gut healing journey, but there's this element too where like you start to feel like a patient, right? And it's like, oh, woe is me, I'm sick, I'm broken, I'm a patient, I'm a sick person, so I have to do sick person things and I can't do healthy person things. And there's that, again, like you feel deprived and bummed out and like life is passing you by and you feel like this like sick, sad person stuck in their house all day versus if you just go out and have the pizza and beer. And it's interesting that Cresser of all people said that because I know like, I feel like he's kind of had ebbs and flows in his kind of work. Like his first book, I think it was all about like using paleo as a template and then modifying it from there, kind of like how FODMAP is really intended to be used.
Right.
A little bit like that, but for the paleo diet. And then I had a feeling like he was getting more strict for a while there. And like I knew somebody who worked with him for SIBO specifically, and she was on like the most strict low FODMAP diet to start the SIBO for months and months, maybe even a couple years. And then I don't know where he's kind of at right now, but and this kind of goes back to experiment and listen to your body a bit. Like give things a good go. Like if somebody like a nutritionist or a practitioner recommends that you cut back on alcohol or cut out alcohol or gluten, don't be the dum-dum that like cuts out gluten for 2 days and is like, I feel fine, and then you go for a pizza. Like that might not be long enough to really judge it. But if you genuinely restrict the thing for, a couple weeks or a month or two, and then, you're not sure if it's helping, like try to introduce it again and see what happens. And that goes for, histamine and FODMAPs and all of these things. But it's like, you might not have to restrict as much as you think. And the guy, if it was a net positive for him to have pizza and beer chock full of gluten, chock full of FODMAPs, chock full of all sorts of stuff, but it was healing for him because he got that social connection and he didn't feel isolated and alone and like a convalescent patient anymore. Like it was a win. So try things and see how your body responds.
Right. I love the idea of like, and I know again, like I've talked about it before, like what you're saying, where if you're thinking of yourself as a sick person and patient, that can be really like something to pay really close attention to, and trying to find strategies, whether it's again socializing more or like having mimosas with your friends, alcohol specifically, or finding other strategies that can help you feel less like that. I know for me too, like another big one, socializing and maybe having a drink and going out to eat was definitely one. I think that was positive for me in that front, where you feel less like kind of the outsider, having to bring your meal or, order like a really weird thing on the menu. Again, like just kind of loosening up on that was really helpful. But I also think like fitness was really helpful in a way too, like starting out slow, but just doing strength training, I think really helped me feel kind of strong and that my body could do certain things and push me a little bit outside of the comfort zone. But I just wanted to throw that out there too. I know it's not necessarily alcohol related, but there can be other things that if you are feeling stuck in sort of a sick or patient mentality, trying to find ways that make you feel strong and kind of more confident in your resilient, more confident in your body's ability to do things and to not feel sick. I think is helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. And it kind of goes back together. I'll bring up something too that I didn't intend to mention on this episode, but it popped in my brain anyway. Keep in mind the circadian, it's not a bad thing.
Okay.
Keep in mind the circadian rhythm disruption that can go with alcohol consumption. So for twofold. A, you might think like, oh, I'll drink the glass of wine or the shot of whiskey and then I'll be able to fall asleep easier, but you will probably have less quality sleep, even if you like pass out from it. I know that was something, a patient brought that up kind of recently, and I think my mom has noticed that too. Like a lot of people have this perception of like, oh, I'll have like a nightcap and that'll help me get to sleep. And like you kind of pass out easier, but then the sleep is not good quality. But also, particularly for the young folk, if you're going out to, the bars or clubs or concerts, and that's where you're getting your alcohol consumption, that's going to go with sleep disruption too. Because, you're going to work or school from, 8 or 9 o'clock until 5 o'clock, Monday through Friday, and then Saturday night you're up until 4 a.m. Like, that's a pretty big jump for your poor circadian rhythm. And then there's that coupled with the alcohol. So if you feel like this is negatively affecting your gut healing journey, maybe part of it is the circadian rhythm piece of it, and maybe another part of it's the alcohol. Like, you might actually be okay doing like mimosas with your brunch gang in, in daylight hours, and you're just having one drink and it's not throwing off your circadian rhythm versus getting snockered in, Las Vegas or whatever it might be. So just thought I'd throw that out there because there's multiple variables going hand in hand there.
Yeah, it honestly makes me wonder, like, how I survived college. Like, to be honest, some of these things, like, again, some of just the level to the extent that I drank in college. And again, I wouldn't even say I was, like, as bad. Like, some people go out every night. I don't get that.
God.
But, like, I was definitely a weekend drinker in college, but it's just like, oh my gosh, like, how do you survive with, like, crappy sleep, crappy food, drinking more heavily, I think, in college. It's just, it's so interesting to just look back and be like, oh, what?
I'm curious. I wonder what our interaction would have been like. Like, if we met in college, if we had a class together or something, I wonder how we would have clicked back then. Because we were probably in two completely different places. Like, for me, I never drank. Like, I would drink, and still, this is still kind of my normal. I would maybe drink like once or twice a year. It was like the end of the year party for my team, and maybe like end of the semester, like winter break, kind of go out once or something. That was kind of it. And granted, like, typically it would be more of like a get drunk kind of situation.
Right.
But yeah, it's funny because I had teammates. Like, to me, I was like, I could never drink heavily in college because I was on a team and we had to, I woke up at 4:55 a.m. Every day for 4 years of my life, and I had to be at the boathouse with completely dressed, ready to go, running on, because we would do a run before we got in the boats. We had to be on the ground running at 5:30 every single morning at the boathouse. And I was like, I can't possibly go out drinking, get like 2 hours of sleep, and then go and like perform physically and row. However, I had teammates that would do that. I had teammates that were weekend drinkers. They would go out Friday night, Saturday night, and we would have Saturday morning practice. And like, they would go get absolutely wasted. And I was just like, how do you do this to your body? I don't understand. And I always told myself it was because of the team, but I think it's also like I've just never been like super big on it. I think also I'm a wimp. I don't like the taste of most alcohol. Like, if I drink now, it's pretty much going to be champagne or like Pinot Noir. That's kind of it. I don't have the tolerance for anything else. Because it all tastes awful to me.
It would have been interesting to, I was a really good student. Like, I got really good grades all through college. So again, it wasn't like I was like crazy irresponsible or anything, but I definitely, imbibed a lot of beer, in particular, which I think helped. Like, I wasn't a big hard liquor person. I was much more of a beer girl, so like that kind of keeps you somewhat in line, I feel like, versus some of the other
vodka
girls that like I'd hang out with are just like slamming shots, and then like you can't really regulate it as easily if you're slamming shots versus
one of my best friends swore off tequila, and she has not touched tequila ever since. It was Halloween 06, if I remember correctly.
Oh my gosh.
And she was like, no, I'm never touching it again.
Right. Again, I never liked the taste. I like beer. Like, I like the taste of beer. So, like, to me, that was fun to just sip on, be with friends.
Yeah.
You know, and again, we were all good kids, like, in general, but it was just, I sound so old. We were all good kids.
Whippersnappers.
We were all just whippersnappers.
We would get out our flip phones and text each other on the flip phones.
Well, I just remember, probably the period that I drank the most was when we won the national championship when I was at UK for basketball. Like, basketball is the really big sport there, and it was funny because there's this Bud Light beer that came out around that time called Bud Light Platinum. So it comes in a bright blue bottle, and again, we're UK, we're blue. Like, our color's blue.
Okay.
We're called Big Blue Nation, like, we're blue. So I'm like, oh my god, this beer's excellent. And it actually didn't taste very good, but like, it was all about the look of it because, again, we're in the tournament. And so this particular Bud Light Platinum had a higher percentage of alcohol. So usually Bud Light is like 4.2%. That's a typical percentage alcohol of like a beer, somewhere in there, especially a light beer. Well, the Bud Light Platinum was 6%, which is a pretty significant bump. So it was funny. I feel like all my friends through that period of time were like drinking the Bud Light Platinum like they would drink the Bud Light, but it was just like
snookered.
Right, it was just enough of a difference to where like we were a little bit more out of control. So the Bud Light Platinum era was especially crazy, and we were winning the national championship. And
yeah, so you were going to be drinking a lot anyway, regardless.
Right, which...
you.
Good time.
Well, at the end of this episode, I will share my funniest drinking story with you. It's not like anything insane. I have one about my best friend too, that I can share. They're both pretty short, but I'll save them for the end of the episode because I don't want people to be listening and be like, okay, we're going to get to something that helps me now.
Right.
So to go back to nerdy academia land.
And I will save one story for myself where I almost got arrested. Which, again, it will be great to share. There's funny elements to it.
I look forward to story time at the end of this podcast. Stay tuned, people. Stay tuned. So let's talk a little bit more, again, going back to nerdy academia land. And I know we've mentioned this before on previous episodes, but this is, again, something that very much has a happy medium. And I was sharing this with a patient just the other day, actually. There's research now that shows that, so all of us have like an ambient baseline level of inflammation because we live on Earth.
Right.
Like, I heard something once, it was... because basically being exposed to oxygen and like our metabolism dealing with oxygen so much oxidizes a lot of stuff, and oxidation is one type of inflammation that you can get. So basically like our entire metabolism being dependent on oxygen means that no matter what we do, we're going to have some level of inflammation in our body just as a cost of doing business in an oxygen-rich world. That's the way I've heard it before. It's the cost of doing business. So we all have some baseline level of inflammation, which is completely normal and to be expected. And if you drink 0 alcohol ever in your life, you're going to be at that baseline level. But oddly enough, if you have like 1 or 2 drinks per week, you are a little bit less inflamed. oddly enough. So you get a net anti-inflammatory effect from like 1 or 2 drinks a week. I think it's like 1 or 2 for women, 2 or 3 for men is what it ends up being. So you're actually, it's therapeutic in a weird way. Like you're actually less inflamed. But then if you exceed that and you start consuming a lot more, then that's where you start to get more inflammation and you're taxing your liver, you're taxing your nervous system, and that's where it can get more inflammatory. But the way that I explain this to my patient, he really likes exercise. And I said, honestly, it's kind of analogous to exercise. When you lift weights, for example, especially, you get delayed onset muscle soreness, DOMS, because you damaged muscle tissue.
Right.
You like shredded some of the muscles and they leaked out some of their contents and they're puffy and swollen and inflamed. And that's why we get delayed onset muscle soreness after we work out, because we literally damaged the muscles. But the cool thing is the muscles, when they repair themselves, they build themselves back up bigger, beefier, stronger, faster. So if it's like you go through this micro stress or micro trauma, and then you build up stronger. And then you do micro trauma and you build up stronger. And the net result is you get swole. And, you know, the way to look at it is like nobody would ever look at it like a weightlifter or an athlete and tell them, you really shouldn't exercise because your body's going to be inflamed afterwards. Right? Like that would sound stupid because we all know that exercise is good in the long run. You just have to deal with a little bit of inflammation and like stimulate the body and show the body that it needs to be stronger. And then you get that protective effect. Same thing appears to be true with alcohol. Using those enzymes, like the detoxification enzymes, just a little bit is like a friendly reminder to your system of like, oh, hey, remember, we could get poisoned at any moment. We could, you know, we really paranoid.
Right.
Or like we could get exposed to something any minute. You better keep these enzymes primed and ready. So it's like you do this little bit of a poison and it teaches your body how to metabolize the poison so that your detoxification works better in the long run and you're less inflamed. So it's kind of similar to exercise.
It's like a tune-up, so to speak.
Yeah,
and again, I think like with the exercise, I like the exercise analogy because you can overdo exercise too, where your body isn't able to have the buildup. So if you're constantly inflaming your muscles and your body has no time to build that resilience, then you're going to be in problem territory.
Yeah.
And the inflammation is going to exceed any benefit you're going to get. You're not going to build resilience or muscle. But then again, the same thing would go with the drinking. It's like there's a limit too. And I'm glad that you brought that up. I wonder some of the studies too, because I think I've heard that as well, where it's like 1 to 2 drinks for women and again, slightly higher for men. And I wonder a little bit if with some of those, they've also uncoupled like the social aspect too. They might have.
Yeah.
But I think that could be an interesting cofactor as well. But yeah, I think a little bit of alcohol, and again, like I think putting it in terms of like 1 to 2 drinks a week seems like a reasonable amount. I don't know if you've ever looked at this study in terms of where it might lean into a more of a gut disturbing element, like what levels do we need to be more concerned about gut-wise and maybe overall-wise. I know there was this study from, I think, is it from the American College of Gastroenterology? I don't know if you've seen this one. Basically found that, 1 drink per day for women, 2 for men, could lead to higher incidences of SIBO. Is that something that you've read?
No, I don't think so. I'm not terribly surprised. And it's interesting because I was going to say sometimes I've seen competing numbers. Like my numbers that I cited of 1 to 2 drinks per week for women and 2 to 3 per week for men mostly came from Chris Masterjohn. I know he did a video about that not all that long ago, and I'm pretty sure those were the numbers. I feel like I've also seen some places cite like 1 drink a day. So it would be 7 per week, which seems like a very big difference.
Right.
I'm less inclined to believe that. But yeah,
Right.
I don't know. I kind of wouldn't be surprised. And I'm going to harken back to something we've talked about before, and it makes me cringe every time I think about it. The studies that come out and they get put on the news and the tabloids that say a glass of red wine a day is just as good as going to the gym. And every time I see that, I'm like, oh, it physically hurts my eyeballs to read that. Stop. But then people believe that, and they're like, cool. Like, I'll hit the Pinot Noir instead of going to O2 Fitness. Sign me up. And I know, like, my mom believed that for a while. And, you know, she was having, like, her glass of red wine every night. And it was a big glass. Like, it was not one serving. Let's get that first. She would have her glass of red wine every night. And finally, like, I kind of talked to her a little bit about it. And she was like, well, they say it's, you know, heart healthy. And it's just as good as going to the gym. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. And that brings me up to another point with alcohol, too, which is, be aware if you're using alcohol for stress management, because really it's not doing anything for your stress management. What it's doing is it's numbing you. And that is ultimately not going to be helpful for you, and it's not going to be good for your nervous system. If you just keep suppressing the stress, suppressing the emotions and the garbage and the yuckiness, if you just keep shoving that down and ignoring it, and soldiering on and like drinking through that, it's not going to be a good time. I'll just share that. So be mindful, because I think there's a difference between, and you can numb out with other stuff too. I think my form of numbing out is scrolling on social media or watching something, you know, watching too much K-pop on YouTube and avoiding things that I should be doing or could be thinking about. But alcohol is probably the most common and one of the most socially acceptable forms of numbing out to your stress.
Right. I think that's such a great point. You know, I think there's this meme sort of moms coming home and needing like their glass of wine to de-stress. You know, I just think that's such a common like trope in society.
The number of products geared towards women and wine is
wine
insane.
O'clock, like, or whatever. It's wine.
Yeah, exactly.
O'clock.
Like live, laugh, wine. Wine o'clock. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. I guess that's not specific to wine, but like there's all of these. You know, you could find like koozies and like linens and T-shirts and decorative wall art from Target. All of these things targeted towards, you're a chick, especially a mom, you need your wine, honey. Here you go. And that's another thing too, is like I know sometimes I see like in mom groups, sometimes I see that they'll have like a social thing where it's like, let's go have wine at the such and such place. And I just kind of pass on those in particular, because again, it's never been super my jam. But, and also like part of me stubborn. I refuse to like buy into the fact that because I'm a mom, I need wine. Like, I will enjoy a glass of wine when I want a glass of wine. We're visiting a family friend this weekend when I go to an herbal conference, and like that family friend likes wine, so I guarantee we'll have a glass of wine with her each night that we're there over the weekend. But it's not going to be like a big thing. Yeah, culture around alcohol is really bizarre, to be sure.
Yeah. And I also wonder too, with some of these studies, like, I feel like we often underreport things like alcohol too. So like maybe some of these studies where they're like, I drink 1 glass a day or two drinks a day, might be actually a little bit higher. I think so. But even again, like if it is, again, if this study's to be totally trusted, I'm sure that we could benefit from more studies on some of these things too. But if it is like one-ish drinks a day for women, 2-ish drinks a day for men raises your risk of SIBO, I think it kind of can help you orient yourself as to like what amount of alcohol might be beneficial to health. Like what you were saying, the 1 to 2 drinks a week is going to be way different than drinking each day. and giving your body some time to recover. It's almost similar to what you were describing before. Like if you're drinking every day and you're kind of stressing out the detox each day and there's no chance to build any resiliency in the systems, that's where you might run into it not having a hormesis type effect, but having a net negative. And I'm sure there's variation across the spectrum of people, of how much you can tolerate genetically and all that jazz. But again, I think probably a good rule of thumb, I like it as like 1 to 2 drinks a week for women and maybe a little bit higher for men. But, you know, I just think it's interesting, that particular study, because they kind of labeled that as moderate alcohol consumption, like once a day, or 2 drinks a day for men. And I think, again, it's probably a lot for us, but I don't know. I know some people that do drink most days, like in the evenings, like when they get home from work. So I don't know. I think depends on where your reference point is. I don't think that would by any means be considered alcoholism. Typically, again, I think it needs to be diagnosed differently, but you know, alcohol abuse is definitely linked to higher rates of SIBO. Anything that really stresses out the liver to high levels is definitely going to be problematic, but I think that there's maybe a portion where if you're kind of moderately consuming but pretty frequently, where it could be problematic.
And I even wonder too, like, as we talk about these numbers, for example, it's probably not even something that you need to be super diligent about tracking, right? Like, I don't want people to get lost in these numbers and be like, oh my God, I absolutely cannot go over 2 per week. Like, you know, keep it at 1 to 2 per week as kind of your max, or where you kind of hang out for the most part. And then if you go to a wedding, or if you have a vacation or a beach trip, like, get the sex on the beach. Get the beer and enjoy the game. Like, do the special occasion stuff, and just know that it is what it is. But maybe acknowledging. Go ahead.
I just wanted to throw, because there's probably going to be weeks where you don't drink at all. Like, again, this is like an average. I view it as like an average versus an absolute.
And that's the glory of, like, if you don't drink every single day or every single week, then you do have that wiggle room, and the average still works out to be okay. I'll point out too, like, keep in mind that alcohol has quite a few calories typically. Maybe not hard liquor like vodka or something like that, but if you're drinking wine every night or beer every night, that's a significant amount of calories. I've worked with people who, along with their gut issues, they're having a hard time losing weight, and then they just cut out the alcohol, and that they like lose 10 pounds like with no effort whatsoever, because they were drinking a lot of calories. And again, because it's kind of seen as A, socially acceptable, but B, like in the case of wine, it's seen as a health promoting thing, we lose sight of the fact that it has quite a few calories in it. So be mindful of that as well.
Well, again, like if let's say you're someone that's drinking, like, you know, you're a dude who's drinking 2 drinks, 2 beers or something 2 or 3 times a week. So it could be like, depending on what type of beer it is, because a light beer is going to be different than sort of like an IPA. You could be just cutting that out could take away 500 to 800 calories, depending again like on what type of beer you're having.
And they're relatively empty calories, with the exception of the resveratrol in the wine. Like, you're not getting vitamins and minerals and a lot of significant health benefit from anything else that's in the alcohol. Red wine's kind of the exception to the rule, probably, but, you know, there's like no other nutritional value other than calories in something like a beer. So yeah, be mindful of that. But I think this might be a good point to transition a little bit to some of the like nerdy academic stuff as far as what's the big deal? Like, what negative things will alcohol do to the body, and the mechanism? And part of my curiosity with this is that if you have a rough idea of the negative stuff that overconsumption will do to you or do to your gut, then if you have a week, again, where like you're going to Mexico and you're going to be at a resort and have unlimited alcohol and you want to drink. Like, okay, you can make the decision, like you're a grown up, you can make the decision to drink and overconsume for the week or two, but maybe you can have some band-aids and some stuff to help your body in the moment, right? Like if you know the mechanism of how the shit's going to hit the fan, you could try to put some saran wrap around the fan blades before that happens, so to speak. So that's a really good new analogy. I'm gonna make an Instagram post about that, man. Ooh, put saran wrap on the fan blades. I like it. Anyway, the most notable, probably the best known effect that alcohol is going to have on the gut itself is inducing leaky gut. Right, so intestinal permeability, and then what happens with that is that you start to get more crud come through the gut barrier and get into the bloodstream and start ticking off your immune system and all of that fun stuff. You start to get endotoxin or LPS in the bloodstream, your immune system goes bonkers, you start stimulating the heck out of immune receptors like TLR4, and your immune system loses its mind because now the gut is wide open and more stuff like debris from your microbiome and your food is coming in, and that poses potentially a bigger risk for things like food sensitivities and allergies and like the immune system losing tolerance to stuff like that, as well as the microbiome, and then just like the inflammatory stuff that comes from LPS. But I think leaky gut induction is probably the best known effect of alcohol directly on the gut. But again, thinking of the person who might be going to the Bahamas and they're on a resort and they just want to drink for the week and not worry about it. Okay, so like maybe you pack a bottle of glutamine, right? Like maybe you pack something to help with leaky gut, knowing that that's a thing that happens. I'm not saying that this is something you should be doing all the time. If you're listening to us and you're like, I want to drink 3 glasses of wine a day, lady, shut up. And that, like, don't think that you can still get away with that on the regular and then take glutamine and call it good. But I'm saying, like, for those special occasions or a trip or something where you know you're going to overconsume, maybe patching up your gut a little bit extra with things like glutamine or probiotics might help curtail any of the insult that happens. Again, saran wrap on the ceiling fan blades.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. I think it's important, too, to just recognize that alcohol gets metabolized in the stomach. So, again, I know I mentioned earlier that you want to be more careful if you have, like, gastritis or ulcers or anything like that. But the reason is because that's where alcohol gets metabolized. And I think that's important, too, to recognize, too. Like, what do people do when they have a hard night of drinking? They are like, oh, I need, like, Advil, an NSAID, which also gets metabolized by the stomach. So, I think, definitely don't take any NSAIDs with drinking would be kind of my recommendation, to really trying to hydrate, maybe doing some electrolytes or something after drinking. And doing, I think, anti-inflammatory support. Otherwise, again, if you wanted something that sort of would maybe have similar effects as an NSAID, but not some of the negatives, maybe doing like a curcumin or a turmeric or something like that. That could help a little bit, maybe. But again,
I think also B vitamins. Like, B vitamins make a lot of those detox enzymes work better. And I remember in grad school, so I kind of became known as like the functional medicine person on campus because I was like always trying to get people to go to the seminars with me. And it was like, oh, I can talk to them, I can get you a discount. I was like a weird drug dealer. And like I was on a bunch of supplements because I was trying to heal my gut. And I remember one of my friends commented that, like, even when I did drink significantly, I really didn't get bad hangovers frequently. And like everybody else would be absolutely annihilated. And I remember one friend commenting, yeah, it's probably because of all the supplements she takes. And I was like, oh, that's not a bad point because I'm taking a whole buttload of B vitamins amongst other stuff in like some of the stuff I'm taking. So I wonder if he had a point, but B vitamins do make a lot of those detox enzymes work better. So even something like a multivitamin or a B complex can help you kind of metabolize it to the best of your ability.
Right. I know all my friends, whenever I go to like a bachelorette party, it's like the Pedialyte packages are everywhere, you know, Pedialyte or any type of electrolyte. Just funny. It's like every memory that I have of Pedialyte is me being like sick as a 7-year-old and my mom like bringing me this little Pedialyte, and then, you know, now I'm looking around at my friends all just like, ugh, with their little Pedialyte, you know.
Your group of friends are a hoot. You guys take drinking to a whole new level. I've never even heard of that before. That's so funny.
Yeah. It's a common thing. Like usually, so with the bachelorette parties I go to, a lot of times they'll have like a little goodie bag for each person. And again, it's like Pedialyte or some sort of electrolyte thing is in it each time, like without fail.
I'm a rookie. I don't know. I guess I just don't know how I made it this far in life without knowing this.
It's funny too because one of the ones I went to, I brought, like, I think I had Seeking Health's electrolyte mix, but it has like no sugar, you know, and so I was like, oh, everyone, like, I brought these, and like you could tell they were like, no, we're just gonna stick to the Pedialyte that like has more sugar in it.
Yeah.
So it's just
like, keep your hippie stuff to yourself.
Exactly. Like, we want some of this good, sweet electrolyte drink, not any of your Seeking Health BS.
Well, maybe they were not seeking good health in that moment, Amy.
Maybe they were seeking comfort, comfort with their Pedialyte. Right.
Numbing with the alcohol. That's too funny. I can just picture the peculiar faces you got too. Let me think. I think that's all I wanted to share with the leaky gut thing. I mean, we have a whole episode on leaky gut, so I don't need to go into a great amount of detail with that.
I think the liver, again, obviously is a big one too. And I think when it comes to liver issues, I think it's such a spectrum. Like, there's a lot of people in the U.S. that have like have fatty liver, but they don't necessarily have like full blown liver disease per se. And that's something to keep in mind too. Is just like, the health of the liver is going to be really important digestively as well. So if again, like, liver is a bigger part of your story, you might want to be a little more cautious as well. I would say like the biggest ones is clearly if you've had a history of alcohol abuse, or again, you're an addict, or you've had recent history of like ulcers, gastritis-y type stuff, and then liver, any sort of like liver issue.
Even if your liver enzymes are a bit elevated, like, that's so common for AST and ALT to be marginally elevated, like 30s, 40s, 50s, and for it to fly pretty much under the radar. Now, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, NAFLD, for all that it says non-alcoholic, alcohol is not going to make it better. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I think that's a valid point. I think also, like, the nervous system, right? Like, that's another area that's hit pretty hard with alcohol, acutely in particular. But my guess is, I mean, all of this could fold into that study with the SIBO predilection going up. But I wonder if part of it, too, was nervous system involvement. Because if you think, like, how do we test for a field sobriety test if you get pulled over for drunk driving? It's a neurological exam, to a point where, I will share, one time I got pulled over and I had to have a field sobriety test done on the side of the road. I was stone cold sober. I was the designated driver. It was my husband's birthday. His best friend and wife at the time were visiting. I took them down to, like, you know, downtown Tempe or whatever, and they went drinking. I had one cider like 3 hours prior, and that was it. And then I was the designated driver. And this was not the original story I was going to tell, by the way. And so we're driving back. It's like 1 o'clock at night or 2 o'clock at night, and I see a cop behind me. So being smart, I'm like, all right, I'm just going to make a point to, like, drive safe. You know, like, normally I'm a person who goes like 5 above the speed limit. So I kind of took it down a peg, and I was going like 2 or 3 above the speed limit to be kind of careful. And he pulled me over, and I was like, I know for a fact that I was driving safely because I saw you behind me. I'm not a pardon my French, but I'm not a dipshit. Like, what are you doing? And So he's doing the field sobriety test. The 3 drunk people in the car are laughing at me. They think it's hilarious. But I tell you, as a, like, neurology snob, apparently, this cop doing the field sobriety test, I nearly lost my shit. Because basically all of that is cerebellar testing. Like the heel-toe, inline walking.
Right.
You would do that in an exam if you suspected cerebellar disease. Like, that's
Right.
a cerebellar test. The finger to nose, classic cerebellar testing. Following the eyes, the tracking of the eyes, like, a lot of cerebellar involvement in that too. And he's doing all of this stuff, and I came so close. I didn't, but I came so close to telling him, you're doing this wrong. Like, you're doing it wrong,
Right.
because he did such a lousy job. But I shut my mouth because I was like, oh no, you're going to go to prison if you say that. But I was laughing because, like, he was doing, the, like, this kind of thing. And he was going way too fast. And he did it so many times. And I remember I actually had to tell him, I was like, FYI, my contact lenses are really drying out because I was trying to, like, keep my eyes open to follow
Right.
and track stuff.
Right.
And I was like, can I just, like, get a good blink in for a second and, like, wet my contact lenses? But he was doing this. He had me going back and forth following the finger and doing this cardinal fields of gaze exercise for, I kid you not, like, quadruple the amount of time you would ever do that clinically. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my mind. I can't tell him he's doing it wrong, but I really want to tell him he's doing it wrong. Like, and my contact lenses are drying out into little prunes in my eyeballs, and I'm gonna look drunk just because my contact lenses whizzle up in my eyeballs. He let me go, it was fine, but the drunks in the car did get a very, very big kick out of that. But
oh my gosh.
The point here is that we literally test, like, the objective testing to see if you're drunk is all neurological testing. And, for all that the cerebellum doesn't get talked about in the gut health world, I'm telling you, with neurology, everything is connected to everything else. The brain fires down into the brainstem. The cerebellum fires down into the brainstem. The inner ear goes to the brainstem. Like, the thalamus goes to the brainstem. Like, everything is connected into the brainstem. And then that's, like, the central operating switchboard. Your vagal nerve nuclei are in your brainstem.
Right.
And they're getting information from the rest of your nervous system, including but not limited to your cerebellum. So I wonder if there's a degree of that involved with that SIBO study as well, where it's like, maybe you're compromising your nervous system and compromising your vagus nerve enough, that plus the liver involvement, the leaky gut, and then the microbial piece, which we'll talk about next. And then it makes sense that drinking too much would lead to higher incidence of SIBO.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Totally.
It's probably a little bit of everything.
Right.
But that being said, so I know before we recorded this episode, I was like, I don't have a lot to say about alcohol. I don't really know a ton of the physiology and stuff. I guess I proved myself wrong. But I found 3 articles that I just wanted to share, like, little tidbits of on the episode, because I think what a lot of people are curious about these days is there anything that happens with the gut microbiome if we drink more than this magical number 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 that we've been talking about?
Right.
And
keep talking. I'm gonna switch my chairs real quick.
Sure.
I have a birth ball that I'm sitting on.
Says the pregnant lady. And again, I will reiterate before I continue, just think, people, by the time this episode airs, Amy will probably be up to her eyebrows in baby.
Yeah,
how crazy
true.
is that? Oh my
True.
gosh. But anyway, yeah, so there's 3 articles, and I'll just kind of give you a teeny little smattering. I did not read the entire article, but I thought that there was just a little bit of interesting stuff to be had from it. So there's one, the PubMed ID, if any of you want to be nerds and go read it yourself. The PubMed ID number is 266-95747. It's titled The Gastrointestinal Microbiome, Alcohol Effects on the Composition of Intestinal Microbiota. And, for example, now they're trying to piece out, like, alcoholic versus cirrhosis versus whatever else, but they said possible beneficial changes in the microbiome can sometimes be seen. increased alcohol consumption seems to be related, or seems to favor increased Firmicutes, which is a big group of, a lot of them are short-chain fatty acid producers. So Firmicutes tend to go up. Lactobacilli, which we all know from probiotics, which belongs to the phylum Firmicutes, those also tend to go up. And then there's been mixed results with bifidobacteria, but some studies suggest that bifido go up. Again, maybe it depends on the type of the alcohol and like if there's polyphenols or anything like that. But that's kind of interesting because those are three things that you wouldn't think would be benefited from this. Then, like in alcoholics, they've seen Clostridia go down. Now, Clostridia belong to that group Firmicutes, or that phylum, and Clostridia are like some of the good guys within that group. So that's the rise in Firmicutes versus lowering Clostridia. We could get into that, but I won't nerd out too much. Of note, this study is suggesting that I always mispronounce this one, Verrucomicrobiota, so like Akkermansia goes down, Proteobacteria go up, and bacilli go up. And then there's some others that might be going up, like Prevotella, Streptococci may go up, but lowering your Akkermansia and increasing bacilli and Proteobacteria, probably not the greatest thing, generally. So that's one study. Then the next one is a more recent one. It's from about a year ago. About a year ago. PubMed ID is 34224314 for those of you who are nerds, titled Alcohol as Friend or Foe in Autoimmune Diseases, a Role for Gut Microbiome. And similarly, they talk about in one of these that leaky gut ensues, you get more LPS going through, triggering the immune cells, and then that leads to more antibodies being produced against stuff that you normally wouldn't want to make antibodies against. You start getting inflammatory cytokines. But they do say here, although the precise mechanism is not well understood, low to moderate alcohol may have a positive impact on inflammation via increasing Akkermansia muciniphila and other protective gut microbes, as well as contributing to increases in acetate, polyunsaturated fatty acids, high-density lipoprotein, and nitric oxide. So again, like low to moderate, probably protective in multiple different ways, one of which might be, it might increase Akkermansia. Now again, like, would we see different results if it was like red wine, which clearly has polyphenols in it, versus like a shot of vodka? I don't know. But I thought that was good that they mentioned that. And then last but not least, this was a 2020 paper, PubMed ID 316894142, title Changes in the Composition of Human Intestinal Microbiome in Alcohol Use Disorder, a Systematic Review. And similarly, they said that they looked at 17 studies. I think it says here all of them used 16S testing, so that's very analogous to like uBiome or Ombre, something like that. And it says intestinal microbiome alterations in individuals with alcohol, what do they call it? Alcohol use disorder include depletion of Akkermansia, mucinophilia, and Faecalibacterium prasinensis. That would make sense in the context of Clostridia going down, because it belongs to that group. And an increase in Enterobacteriaceae, those are some of the more problematic ones underneath the Proteobacteria phylum. At the phylum level, a higher abundance of Proteobacteria and lower of Bacteroidetes were found. Mixed results regarding Bifidobacterium were obtained. Several species of short-chain fatty acid producing bacteria had a lower abundance in individuals with alcohol use disorder. So, painting this picture where, there might be some here or there that go up and down. It seems like some of your good guys, if you really are over-consuming, some of the good guys like Akkermansia, like Faecalibacterium prasinensis, possibly Bifidobacterium, that one's questionable. Sounds like probably your short-chain fatty acid producers. Those are probably going to go down if you overconsume alcohol. And then pretty consistently I was seeing that an increased abundance of Proteobacteria or some group underneath there like Enterobacteriaceae, they go up. And of note, that could be part of the SIBO link too. Because we know that people with SIBO who are symptomatic also have dysbiosis in the small bowel, and it's the dysbiosis that maybe is associated more with the symptoms of SIBO. And we know that from Pimentel's research that supposedly, as of right now, we think that the overgrowth comes from two of the Enterobacteriaceae members, E. coli and Klebsiella, primarily. So it would make sense if increasing consumption of alcohol, you increase Klebsiella and E. coli, and then you have maybe compromised motility, maybe compromised gut-liver axis. Also, maybe you're like drinking away your feelings and your poor vagus nerve is fried because you're not acknowledging and dealing with your stress or your grief or your whatever. And it's like perfect storm. And then there's leaky gut and maybe leaky stomach. There's this perfect storm of all of these squirrely things that can lead to SIBO.
Right. Yeah. It's wild.
I feel like that was... I feel like I just regurgitated a lot of you.
Yeah, I'm my pregnancy brain is just like, ooh.
Amy's just like checking out. Well, maybe I could wake up your pregnancy brain as we wrap up this episode with some stories. So yeah. I'll show you mine if you show me yours.
Okay.
So, I shared the one where I was pulled over for drunk driving when I was stone cold sober, and the drunks thought it was hilarious. The other one, the one that I was going to share with you, is so at UB there once or twice we went to this thing that it was like some sort of gala. I don't remember exactly what it was. It was just an excuse to get drunk. But it was great because what happened was the university like rented out some like ballroom or something in downtown Buffalo. And you could buy tickets, and it was dinner and then an open bar the entire night and dancing and like a DJ. And there was, I kid you not, there was like a drunk bus that would come and pick you up from North Campus or South Campus. And all of these already pre-gaming drunk college kids would get all glammed up, and we would like pre-game at our apartment or whatever, or the dorm, and we would get on the bus and we would be carted down to downtown Buffalo, and we would have this like gala night for literally no reason. We weren't celebrating anything in particular. It was just like the yearly gala. And then they would cart our asses home. It was great. So we went to that, I think, 2 years, my friends and I. And I remember the 1 year, Maura, my one friend, was really into the idea of Jell-O shots. So we made, way too many. And so we pre-gamed with Jell-O shots, and I forget what else. And we get to the thing, already pretty drunk. We have our dinner, we have more alcohol, and at one point I was like, oh, okay, I've got to go to the bathroom. And I told her, I was like, all right, I'll be back, guys. I'm going to go run to the bathroom. So I go to the bathroom, and, it's like, you're drunk, and you're kind of getting tired, because this was like a late night for me too. And I just thought to myself, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to close my eyes for like a minute. I'm just going to do one of these, and I'm going to fold up on my lap on the toilet in the bathroom. I'm just going to like sit there for a minute and kind of get my bearings, because I was like a little bit dizzy, and I thought, yeah, and then I'll go back and dance. And then I was like, okay, I guess I'm done. And when I got up and I like left the bathroom, I was thinking, my contacts are kind of dry, and I'm kind of blinking. I'm like, that's weird, but hopefully whatever, they'll be fine. So I go back to the table, and apparently I was gone for like an hour and a half. So I took a nap on the toilet. I did not just put my head down. I took a nap for a while. And that's why my contact lenses were dry. But I got back to the table, and my friends were like, where have you been? And I was like, what do you mean, weirdos? I was in the bathroom. Like, stop stalking me. And they're like, dude, you were gone for an hour and a half. And I was like, oh. Like, I thought, I've been there. I was in there for like 4 minutes. Relax. God. But the whole time I was gone, they would come back to me. They'd be like, where's Nikki? I don't know. Gosh. She must be out there dancing. Right. She's a dancing machine.
Right.
Just like, they assumed I was out on the dance floor, and I was taking an hour and a half nap on the toilet the whole time. So that's the kind of drunk I am. I'm not going to do anything belligerent or dangerous. I'm just going to take a nap on the toilet, apparently.
Well, it's funny because my story that I had involves a nap as well.
Okay.
So,
and this was when you almost got got put in jail, or
well,
okay?
Okay, so I was 20, so I was underaged.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at a Rascal Flatts concert. So, like, the way that the concerts are set up here, like, everyone sort of pre-games in the parking lot. And the weird thing is, like, I didn't drink very much. So, like, it's really, I think it was really hot. Maybe I hadn't eaten enough or something. But, like, the weird thing is I'm, like, so surprised I got so intoxicated this time. Because maybe I had like 4 or 5 beers over a course of a period of time, which, like, again, to me at that time wouldn't have made me, like, as bad as I was. But, so, I got really drunk, and I was kind of, like, coming in and out of, like, blackout. Like, it was bad. It was really bad. I was shocked that I was this drunk, because, like I said, I didn't drink that much. I think it was because I was, like, dehydrated or something. I don't know. But I was coming to, so, like, I was definitely, like, coming back up from being very intoxicated. And I was with my friend, and we were up against this wall. So, like, the way the concert's set up, there's, like, a lawn, and then there's a pit. And so, like, we were in the lawn part, but there's, like, a walkway at the very top of the lawn with, like, a half wall that looks over the concourse on the other side of the wall. We were kind of sitting on this wall, and my friend goes, "Stay right here. I'll be right back. I'm going to the bathroom." So I was like, okay. And I literally am just, like, leaning up against this wall. And of course I fall asleep. And the people that run Riverbend are all these, like, really intense moms that, like, run, I don't know. But anyway, this really intense
like the mom mafia?
Right, the mom mafia. They get power, like, running these concert venues. Or at least that's how I felt. So, all of a sudden, I'm getting yanked up out of my nice slumber next to my nice wall. And it's this mom, and she's screaming at me, "You're gonna get arrested, you're gonna get arrested," like, screaming at me, like, again, as someone that just gets, like, jarred up from their drunken slumber. And then I'm starting to yell at her, like, "Let me go!" And so, like, I'm, like, fighting her because she's screaming at me. Like, she's not doing anything to, like, de-escalate the situation at all. So I'm trying to get away from her. I'm like, "Let me go," like, blah, blah, blah. But she takes me back behind to, like, the drunk tank of this concert. And I'm pissed. Like, I am revved up to here. And I was not that type of, like, drunk person. I was usually just chill. But, like, in this instance, this lady pissed me off so much. And she probably had every right to, like, pick me up. She just went about it the wrong way. But anyway, so I'm taken to this drunk tank, and I see a girl back there sitting in a wheelchair, sobbing. And I look at the girl, I'm like, we gotta fight back. Like, I'm so upset because the lady keeps saying, "You need to sit down in this other wheelchair." And I said, "I'm not sitting in the wheelchair." And then she shoves me into the wheelchair. And then there's this, like, power dynamic between me
This is the mob mafia.
Right, there's this power dynamic. So then I kept flipping off the brakes of the wheelchair and rolling around. And she would come and immediately slam the brakes down. And then again, I'd pick them up again and roll around, and she'd run over and slam the brakes down. So there was, like, this whole power dynamic going on between me and this lady. But
I hope Cece is not hearing this story, by the way. You you muffle your ears in there, Cece. Okay, grab a piece of uterus and protect thy ears.
It's okay if she does. Mom's not perfect. But eventually I, like, tried to run away. Like, I tried to, like, act still and then just, like, dart, like, run to my... Because I kept telling them, like, my friend, I couldn't understand why they wouldn't just let me go, because my friend, we were leaving the concert venue. His sister was picking us up. So I'm like, "Can you just let me go with him? I'm leaving. Like, you don't have to deal with me anymore. Just, like, let me go." And so, like, my friend was standing, like, behind the drunk tank. I just had to get to him, and I was running, and she caught me, and she brought me back.
What'd she do, tackle you?
I don't know. Honest to God, it was But then by that point, when I tried to run and flee, there was like a security guard there. And then he made me call my mom. And then he talked to my mom, and he was like, "You better get down here. We're gonna take her in. She's not listening to the mom or whatever." So, yeah, that was my night. Then my mom came and picked me up, which it was funny because I my parents were not pleased, but they weren't really that upset. And I just feel like because I'm the third kid, and they're just like tired.
Whatever.
They were just like, we don't have the energy to deal with this.
Yeah.
But yeah,
well,
I think if I would have actually gotten arrested, they would have been upset.
Was the concert in Cincinnati or Kentucky?
This was in Cincinnati. It was actually right on the border. So like I'm in Cincinnati, which is right on the border anyway. Like I'm 10 minutes away from that concert, but the concert place is right on the river.
Okay. Well, now I know about the Cincinnati Momfia.
Right.
And I've got to watch my back when I visit you, man. We're not going to any concerts at that river venue. That's for damn sure.
To be fair, I was drinking and probably needed to be like picked up and escorted somewhere, but she was not she was not a calm presence, and I think it just amped me up more.
Clearly.
And so it was an interesting evening at the Rascal Flatts concert.
Of all things.
In 2010 or whatever.
Too much. Well, I think I can't think of a better way to wrap up this episode than with our drunken nap stories.
Right. We were both nappers. I just needed to go to the bathroom for some privacy, I guess.
See, and then you could have zonked out for an hour and a half, recharged the batteries, and then I did go out and dance and had fun. But, I need a little snooze first.
Right. You just knew where to snooze. I
never
did not.
See? Privacy. I mean, drunk Nikki knew. And you know what's funny, too, is I still remember, the nap. I still remember thinking, oh, my contacts are dry. And the Facebook memory comes up every now and then. Like, it comes up sometime in the winter or the spring.
Right.
And, every time I see that, I text the screen capture to my friends, because the two people that I was there mostly with were two of my best friends who are twins. So we have a group thread, and I'll be like, look what came up. And it's Maura posted on my timeline, I don't even know how many years ago. And she's like, where's Nikki? She's out dancing. She's a dancing machine. And we always know what that post is from. That's the day after gala.
Yep. Oh my gosh. That's so funny.
Too much. Yeah,
Something just popped into my head too. One of my best friends, that same concert, the Rascal Flatts concert, she has horrible memories from because she was in a porta potty, and some crappy kid from our high school went and banged, didn't knock it over, but kind of nudged the porta potty, and she had set her wallet with her ticket, her money, all her stuff, and it fell into the porta potty, and she had to fish it out.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. So we both had bad incidences that were traumatizing at the Rascal Flatts.
I feel like she wins, though. Yours was bad, but yours is hilarious. Hers is just really gross.
Right.
Oh, man. Oh, well, that seems very apropos, though, because it is the IBS Freedom Podcast, and we talk about poop, and now you have the visual of this poor human being fishing her wallet and her concert tickets out of a porta potty. I don't know how else to end this episode. So with that, if you're not completely nauseated and vomiting right now, you know the drill. Subscribe, leave a comment, leave a 5-star review on Google, etc. This is episode 95. You know what to do, people. You know what to do. And we'll see you in the next episode of your favorite podcast, the IBS Freedom Podcast. Until then.